Golden Glass, a Lego Monkie Kid fanfiction written by Jukebox Straws, read by Jukebox Straws. Chapter 2, Session 30. That had been several months ago. Since then, Macaque had grown used to his routine of visiting the simian doctor at their home. It was a small apartment on the busier side of Megapolis, but the inside of the small place was surprisingly quiet. Not to mention, they had an excellent view from their balcony. Their small black cat, which Macaque was informed was named Kygo, always brushed up against his legs whenever they visited. He would sit on their couch, they would present him with a cup of tea, and they would sit in the armchair across from him, and they would talk. It didn't really matter what about, they could talk about anything. Macaque found it quite easy to talk when Kai was around, which was something he had never said about anyone before. He had taken to calling the doctor by their first name, making it more casual. Now Macaque supposed he could say that this doctor had become his friend. Macaque never kept track of how long he stayed at Kai's apartment. Sometimes it was just a quick stop in between errands he was running that day. Sometimes he arrived at dawn and didn't even think about leaving until the sun had begun to set behind the mountains. Kai never seemed to mind. In fact, they seemed to enjoy the Shadow Demon's company. It never mattered what time of day or night, they could always offer him tea and conversation. This particular day, Macaque was laying on the couch, hands folded around a mug of hot cocoa, his mind running 1,000 miles a minute as he rambled on about Wukong and MK and the Lady Bone Demon. Kai was silent, simply listening and writing things down as he went on. So that's why I don't trust Wukong, Macaque finished with a sigh. He left me, cast me in a shadow to rot, and I was stupid enough to let him drift away from me. He clutched his cup, fingernails pressing against the porcelain. I was in love. What was that like, to be in love with him? Kai turned the page on their notebook. Macaque touched the right side of his face, his voice barely a whisper. Kai sat next to him on the couch so they could hear him better. It was easy. We knew each other so well we could finish each other's sentences. He was brave and strong. Everything I ever wanted. What do you see now when you look at him? Kai put down the notebook on the coffee table. An arrogant, selfish, reckless bastard. Macaque grit his teeth. Kai placed their hand on his, stopping his nails from piercing his own skin. Do you think you could ever fall in love again? If not with him, then with someone else? Macaque sighed. I don't know. Something inside me just feels broken, Kai said. Macaque opened his eyes and looked over at them, a bit surprised. Yes. How did you know that? He sat up. Kai looked away. I suppose I've been in your shoes, they said. Then they noted the lack of shoes on Macaque's feet. Or lack thereof. What do you mean? Macaque took his feet off the couch and sat straight, scooting closer to his friend. The copper-haired simian sighed. This session isn't supposed to be about me, Macaque. They were deflecting the question. Macaque would know after having been called out on doing the same thing several sessions ago. Kai, tell me. Macaque's hand was shaking as it reached over and took Kai's. Kai's breath quickened at the touch. You can trust me. Macaque, Kai quickly stood up after a moment of heavy silence. They picked up the 2 mugs on the coffee table. I'll be right back. Just give me a minute. They disappeared into the kitchen. They had left their notebook on the coffee table. Macaque stared at it. He shouldn't. But how could he resist? It was right there. He could just take a little peek and Kai would be none the wiser. No harm, no foul, right? The Shadow Demon slowly lifted the cover of the notebook. The writing inside was in a neat purple pen, bullet points on topics in many of their conversations. At the top of the page it read the following. Patient 1, the six-eared macaque. Although I primarily focus on couples' dilemmas, I have taken it upon myself to aid this particular patient. He seems to be in the most crisis as far as this relationship is concerned. I will tackle the task of his partner at a later date. Session 1. His first one-on-one session, patient seems to be rather defensive when I ask about his past. deflecting any and all serious questions, and claims he doesn't need help. We'll have to dig deeper. Macaque turned the page. The writing began to get less neat as he read about topics in previous sessions they had, topics like Wukong and what he had done to the Dark-furred simian. Session 4. He's beginning to open up a bit more. Macaque has detailed to me his past with his ex-partner, Sun Wukong, and how they acted when they were young together. He seemed to be happy as he reminisced about his past, but then he had to stop himself before it got any further. I'm not giving up on him. Macaque's ears twitched, hearing the clatter of dishes in the sink. He turned the page quickly and skipped to another paragraph. Session 6. Macaque had decided he wanted to go somewhere different to distract himself while we talked, so we went to a library. He seemed very interested in the comic book section. We read through some books together. He seemed to find it very relaxing. Session 9. Macaque and I went out for lunch at an outdoor cafe for this session. The fresh air seemed to calm him. He claims to be more used to the outdoors than the city. We got coffee and took a walk in the city park together. He was more free with his stories about himself and Wukong. Note for later, make sure to get Macaque dark chocolate as a gift. He seems to be a sucker for that. Macaque grumbled a bit embarrassingly as he turned the page again. Session 15. This is the 4th time this month Macaque has shown up on my doorstep at the ass crack of dawn. I've been allowing him to sleep on my couch. The bags under his eyes indicate he may have trouble falling or staying asleep. I put a small amount of melatonin into his tea. He seemed to sleep soundly afterwards, though he had disappeared by the time I woke up in the morning. Session 16. Macaque actually arrived on time for his appointment today. We went over the goals we had set in Session 1 regarding his relationship with Wukong. He says he doesn't want to necessarily heal his relationship with Wukong, but just get over it. It seems he still has some affection for Wukong. Kai came back into the sitting room to find Macaque staring at the open notebook, rereading the last line of their notes on Session 16 over and over. "You're right," he said softly. "I do still love him. I just wish he could see that." Macaque wrapped his arms around himself. Kai knelt down and took his hand. "Macaque, I understand," they said softly but firmly. "But if Wukong can't see it, how long are you going to wait until he does? It's already been centuries." Macaque felt the tears in his eyes. No harm, no foul, his ass. He broke down and clutched onto Kai's shirt as a sob burned in his throat. "I don't know," he cried out. He growled and began pulling at his clothes in anger. He needed to destroy something, and suddenly he wished he was back home in his dojo. Kai sighed softly. I don't know. Wukong, he makes me so angry." "Macaque, I understand your anger." "No, you don't understand! You're a therapist! That's what you're supposed to say!" Macaque was nearly screaming now. Kai backed up a bit, shocked by the sudden outburst. All the digging they had done had finally unlocked the cage, broken through the shell. This was Macaque. The real Macaque, the one that was hurt by the one he loved all those years ago. "I'm just an experiment to you, aren't I? You love writing in your little notebook, taking tabs on my comings and goings. I don't need you documenting my life." Macaque kept going. He knew that it was Kai's job to document everything that happened during their sessions, but he couldn't care less. He knew he was placing his trust in the wrong person, just as he had before. It wouldn't be long before Kai left him, threw him out as a lost cause. It wouldn't be long before they asked him not to come back for another session. It wouldn't be long. Macaque. Kai turned their notebook to the most recent page and handed it to him. "Look at the newest paragraph." Macaque snatched the notebook up and looked at it. Session 30. I know exactly how he is feeling. This is the same situation with me and... The name was scribbled out. Macaque couldn't read it. "He believes I don't understand, but I do. Perhaps I'll bring it up at the next session to better relate to him. Maybe if he sees he's not alone, we can finally make a recovery plan, and maybe I can heal too." Macaque's breathing instantly calmed, and his fur settled from when it had puffed up in anger. Kai was looking down at their feet. "Kai, did someone hurt you?" The shadow demon dropped the notebook and grabbed Kai's arms. The copper-furred simian inhaled sharply, snapped out of their thoughts, and looked up at Macaque. He was taller, but not incredibly so. It was a long time ago, they said. Macaque's hand trembled again. He wanted to touch them, to comfort them, the grip on their arms barely enough to satisfy his craving. He lifted his hand, then waited. Not hearing or seeing any attempts to pull away, he brought his hand to Kai's cheek, feeling the soft fur there. Kai shivered, still not looking into Macaque's eyes. "Macaque, this is unprofessional," they began to say. Macaque growled. "Fuck professionalism," he said. "Stop trying to be my therapist and just be my friend. Just be Kai Jin." Macaque's arm snaked its way around their torso and pulled them closer. Kai didn't hesitate to press their hands to the dark monkey's shoulders. They took a deep breath. "In love once, like you. I had someone. I loved him, but he didn't reciprocate, even if he said he did. He ignored me, stood me up, left me, cheated on me so many times I can't even remember the names of all the people." Kai began to get angry, clenching their fingers around Macaque's shoulders even tighter. Macaque lifted their chin, urging them to keep going. "What happened?" he asked. "When I finally realized who I was, he couldn't take it. He called me a freak. He said the sex wasn't worth it anymore, and then I never saw him again. I was just blocked on all of his social media, and he was just gone. All my money and time wasted. 3 years of my life was gone, and I hated myself. I thought it was all my fault." Kai choked back a sob. Macaque held them closer. "He just used me. Used me for sex, used me for money, used me to impress his family because I was a med student." Macaque's ear twitched. This sounded familiar. "How long has it been since he left?" he asked. 5 years, Kai answered. "I legally changed my name and got the proper medical procedures done about 3 years ago, but I still sometimes feel disgusted that I ever let him put his filthy hands on my body." Macaque's hands twitched. Did they feel that way now? About him? He began to pull away. Kai wordlessly grabbed his hands and put them back where they were without a second thought. The night air was cold, and he was so warm. Kai was drawn in like a moth to the blazing inferno. "Kai." Macaque grazed his thumb over the doctor's bottom lip. They looked into his eyes. Macaque had never really noticed how green Kai's eyes were, as they were always hidden behind the glare of the glasses. But by gods, they were green. "Have you ever—" He might regret asking this question. "Have you ever—" He might regret asking this question. "Have you ever fallen in love with a patient?" Kai's eyes widened. Macaque, being driven by the instinct of wanting to desperately cover up what he just said, moved quickly. He captured Kai's lips in a tender kiss that elicited a small yelp of surprise from the shorter monkey. For once, when he closed his eyes, he didn't think about Wukong. He didn't think about the Lady Bone Demon, MK, Flowerfruit Mountain. He didn't think about any of it. All he thought about was Kai Jin, his friend, and the time they had spent together. He pulled away slightly, Kai's shocked breath blowing over his cheek. "I think—" They reached their hands up to cup Macaque's face. His breath hitched. "I think I just did." To be continued in Chapter 3.